Hey, so today I am going to do a brief tutorial on something that I found really hard when I first started Photoshop, which is blending. So this is going to be kept probably under 5 minutes because I know everybody's busy and I really don't like, I see a lot of tutorials on YouTube that are super long and sometimes we don't have 20 minutes to watch. So I want to do this, and yeah, so we're going to do this. So this in particular, this is how I like to paint. I actually started painting, digital painting on an application called Procreate that is on the iPad Pro, and the blending tool on it is magnificent. So if you have the chance, I highly recommend trying that out. But the way that I like to paint is I really like just kind of laying down all of my colors first, and then kind of going from there and pushing them around into what I want. I think it gives you a lot of, it makes the objects look a lot more 3D if you're pushing the colors in the direction that they actually go, which is pretty cool. But I found out very soon that for Photoshop blending, you have to play around a little bit. So like I had started out with like a hard round brush, and if we had the opacity, I'm going to be talking about using the smear tool today. But if I was to use the brush that they start out with, like a hard round they have it set at 100% opacity. If I were to try to use this like this on here, and let me grab the right layer, I'm probably not even, yeah. So if we were to go in here, this is Tay, by the way. If we were to push this as a blend tool right now, like, how is this blending? This is not what we want here. Look at this. This is not what I call blending. Even if we were to put this down, opacity for blending I've found, or strength, more like for blending, my bad. I like to keep anywhere from 10 to 40%. My favorite blending brush I actually use at 40%, so even if we were to turn this down, it's still not really a blend. It's kind of more just pushing, and if you pull this down to any smaller, like the cattailing you get is like ridiculous. Like it's not any good. So first I'm gonna talk about basically 3 brushes today. The first 2 are ones that you can find actually just in Photoshop for blending. I personally really like the watercolor wash. I can't even speak. So the watercolor wash kind of works by dissolving the pigments kind of together. So it is going to wash it out a little bit. So you want to make sure you have enough paint on there when you're doing this. But if you were to use it here at what, 40% opacity, and just kind of run it over this, like you see how there's no hard line. So I highly recommend this if you have like a really hard line that you want to get rid of. But keeping in mind not using it everywhere, because it will end up kind of just washing everything out and kind of blurring it almost too much sometimes, even at a lower opacity. I'm going to show you all of these brushes actually on like a painting idea, and then I'm going to show you it in like an application of like these. As a side point, this painting that I'm showing you right now is actually, I saved it as a separate one, and then I worked on it again, and this is where it's at right now. So I obviously learned how to blend. Not done yet, but it's getting there. So anyway, going back to here, so this is good for, as I said, like if you have 2 really big colors that you need to blend together, it's a good thing to use. Another one that I really like is the charcoal large smear. This one here is pretty good. The only thing is it does give kind of like a rougher appearance. Again, really good for like bigger lines if you want to kind of blend them together. But if you're zooming in here, you can see it's textured looking, which isn't my favorite. So generally I would go over it with something else afterwards because I don't like that. But if you really just need to like muddy those 2 lines together, like these 2 is like big. So if you wanted to just kind of get yourself started with being able to get these guys to blend, it's really nice. Now, the brush I actually use to blend the most is one I made myself. I found a tutorial online on blending brushes when I was looking on how to blend, and I made it. If any of you guys want to use this brush, just leave a message, comment down below, and I can email you just the brush, because it's quite a few steps to make it. But if we were to zoom in, I like this brush for a few different reasons. The first reason, if we're going to make it a little bigger, I like it mainly for pushing around color. So if I want to like push this up here a little bit more, it's a really good blending brush to have. So if you still want to have a pretty defined line, but you want to be able to move it together, you're not losing any of your colors. Like down through here, we were kind of washing things out. This, you're not going to lose any of your color. You're just going to be able to move it in the right direction and kind of soften that edge if you really want to. I especially like this for small spaces. I'll show you. Wow, this Wacom tablet sometimes zooms in a lot more than I want it to. It can be a little sensitive. So like say we're talking about the eyelid here. I already smoothed this out a little bit actually earlier. Seriously, I'm sorry. But if we go here, and we're talking about under here, if we want to really smooth this out nicely, and I'm going to get rid of my sketch layers real quick. Like this area down here, if we want to smooth it out, we're going to zoom in, and we use this, we can like really get a nice hard lines. I actually use it for doing defined lines too. I don't really like to use the eraser much. So if we were to go to like the eye, for instance, I'm going to get rid of this. Yeah, this is a good example. And we were to move this guy around, we can actually kind of create the shape. So like pushing it into the corners and that kind of thing. We can create the shape using just the blend brush, which is how I like to paint actually. So if we want to pull this down over here, it just kind of gives you a softer feel to everything, which is nice for me. So like if we want to get the shading out, and this is what I mean about like pushing your colors in the direction you want them, it really gives you that like three-dimensional feel to it. Gives you a lot of depth, because you always want to be pushing them in the direction that the object actually is. And again, I'm not looking at my reference right now, which I highly recommend looking at even while blending, but you know why not. So like within like not long at all, this eye has already looked like a million times better, right? And as you said, you just push it out there. So that is the blending brush I like. Now, to be able to see this a little bit better, I kind of made these little things to see how these work. So sometimes the blending brush themselves is not enough to blend everything, and you'll need to do a little extra step, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But let's just go with, show you what the watercolor wash actually does, because as I said, it can be a little bit hard to see. So if we're gonna, I'm gonna put this down a little bit. If we're to use this here, you see how it's giving you this, I'll zoom in even. It's kind of just desaturated. I feel like it's kind of taken away a little bit of the opacity of it and kind of getting a little messy. But it does get rid of that line, which is nice for certain things. Now with the charcoal large smear here, it kind of does something a little different. So it was hard to see my painting, but this is really what it's doing, honestly. So that textured look, I'm not a huge fan of, but again, it gets rid of this line really nicely. My custom blend brush here kind of works a little different. So like you have to work a little harder for, like, as I said, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this totally for like really harsh lines. Like these are very different colors here. They're not very similar, but if you are, you're going to want to do like strokes that are in opposite directions. So down, down, this way, down, down, this way, that kind of thing, and then you can kind of smooth it up and down. Also, so if you ever had lines like this that you're like, I don't really want to use the other brushes, I highly recommend making another layer on top of it. And using one of my favorite brushes for this it's called the Square Pastel. I generally put down the opacity for this at about 40%. And then we make this quite a bit larger, probably about this. So you're going to do like an option select of your color, grab that, and then kind of just paint it over here. And then do the exact same thing over here. So option select this color and then kind of paint it this way. Same thing. And you just keep going back and forth. I know there was another one about this. I might even do 20%. I hate when it does that. 20. Cool. And you can kind of go back and forth and get a really nice blend through here. I personally really like it, the way it does it. But that's one way if you're like not quite in love with how it blended and you don't want to use the other brushes without losing opacity. But it still gives you a pretty decent blend, which is pretty cool. As I said, I like it for pushing around colors mainly. And that brush there, if it's a close color with it, this blending brush, it can get a pretty nice blend. Oh, I'm on the wrong layer. It can get a pretty nice blend. Like these are two, they're not the same color, but if you just, are going to it, it's a slight shade off, it gets rid of that line really easy and really nice. But when it's something that's a little, very drastically different, it might need a little help. With that secondary layer in that Square Pastel that I was telling you about, and again, this is a brush that comes with Photoshop. You can also do that if you want to add back some of that opacity. So you see how it's kind of muddy here? You can kind of go over it again with this and kind of get some of that back. Which I like. So you can still get a little bit better of a blend. Sorry, this guy's lagging a little bit. So it can look a little bit better anyway. So yeah, it's a little bit better of a blend. Same thing with this, of course. So you can get rid of some of that texture. Again, I would say that the charcoal one, I personally only like if it's like a really bad line that you need to get rid of, which isn't a bad thing. It's just I use it sparingly and in very specific circumstances. But it's better than your main one that they have, so I can't really complain. But it can be a little bit more of a harsh thing. But yeah, so if we were to zoom out here, you can kind of see how they all differently blend. My blend brush is probably my favorite. As I said, when you really look at this, these are two different colors. I swear they just blend really well. So if we were going to do like if you look over here at where these two come up here, so this side's this color, this side is up here. So there's actually quite a bit of difference in color. It's just they blend so well because of that brush. So yeah, that is my tutorial. You can start out with something looking like this and end up with something looking like this. As I said, not done. I still have to do quite a few things, but it's looking quite a bit better. And I had such a hard time when I started out with Photoshop, so I hope this was at least a little helpful. And it was way longer than I wanted it to be, sorry, but I still hope it's helpful. I'll try to make it a little shorter next time. Anyway, 再见.